Hey everybody, what's going on? So in this section, what we're gonna do is we are going to show you how you can price your product or service. Now, why this section is going to be extremely critical for all of you guys is because no matter if you're selling a product or service, you wanna make sure that you're pricing it appropriately. A lot of people might be pricing their products too low and that would lead to an unhealthy profit margin, while other people may be pricing too high while their competition comes in and swoops all of their market. So in this section, I'm going to show you exactly how you can price your product or service using something we call value pricing. And what you're going to be able to do by the end of this section is be able to look at the market and understand exactly what you should be pricing, and also how you can add more features into your products or service so you can add more value to your customer and increase your price overall. So whether you're a startup just trying to figure out what you should even price, or if you already have a product or service and you're trying to figure out what price point would be best for your business, this section is going to be extremely valuable for you. So with that said, let's go ahead and dive in. Now, the first thing that we're going to start off with in this section is supply and demand. Now, I know that a lot of you guys have learned about this, whether it's from school or you've definitely heard it somewhere. And I just want to cover the basics of this, and then we're going to dive a lot more deeper into how you can use this and even more advanced techniques. So how supply and demand works, when you really break it down to its simplest form, there's only really two things you need to understand. There's the supply side over here and there's the demand side over here. So if you have a lot of supply, the price of your product or service is going to be lower. Now, if you have very low supply, the price of your product is going to be higher, right? Because if there's less supply and more people want it, then the price goes up. Now, when it comes to demand, the less people demand it, the lower the price is going to be. And the more people demand it, the higher price it will be. So again, that's all you really need to understand when it comes to supply and demand. You got to understand how many other people are supplying the same solution to that problem as you for your startup or for your business, and how many people, meaning the demand, actually want that kind of service that solves their problem. So that's basically the classic understanding of supply and demand. So with that said, let's go ahead and move on. Now, moving forward, like I was saying before, most people, they don't know what to charge their customers, especially for startups. And this is especially true if you're creating something that is not very common in the market, or maybe if it's just something completely new, or maybe it's not something new, but you just don't know what to charge. And so in this section, I'm going to show you how you can figure out the price points of your product or service. Now, what we're going to do is I want to first introduce you to this idea called value pricing. And what value pricing is essentially is that you're pricing your product or service based on the perceived value that people get from your product or service. So let me explain. Okay, so when it comes to price, this is essentially how it works. On the y-axis, let's say you start at the price of $0 and then it goes up to like $100, $1,000, $100,000. It goes up until infinity. So of course, no matter what you're selling, whether it's a product or a service, there is going to be some kind of cost associated to create that product or service. The next level is that there is going to be a price associated with that product or service. So here there's a price to make the thing, and then there's a price that the person who made it, they want to sell it at, and that's what customers see. Now, on top of that, it's going to be this bar called perceived value. That means from the perspective of the customer, how much value do they think that they're getting, and how much money are they willing to pay to get that product or service and obtain that value that you are providing. So the gap between price and cost is a person's reason to sell. So for example, if my cost was $10 and I was selling something for $100, then my margin is going to be $90, and that's great for me because that is a really good profit margin, right? So the bigger this gap, the better it is for the person selling the product or service. Now over here, the gap between price and perceived value, that is your customer's reason to buy. So if they perceive the service or product that you're offering as something as high value, they're going to pay a lot of money for it, regardless of what the actual price should be. Meaning, so let's say everyone's selling something for $100 and you figure out that you have the same product or service, except you add an additional feature where the person is able to achieve the same results with that product or service in half the time, and they're willing to pay double the price for $200. So their perceived value of your product or service, even though you may be doing the same thing as everybody else, because you're doing it, let's say, faster, people may be willing to pay you more money for that service. And so that is the perceived value that they're getting. So all I'm really saying here is that all you need to understand is that you want to give a reason for someone to buy your product or service. And regardless of what other people are pricing their product or service as, if you can figure out a way to make your perceived value higher, then people are going to want to pay you more for that thing. It's the same for why people pay more money for brand drugs that have a name brand versus generic drugs that you can get over the counter, or why certain people will pay a lot of money to go to a prestigious university versus going to one that doesn't have any name. You might be getting the exact same education, you might be getting the same exact product, but let's say if you have a better brand, or you can achieve a result faster, or you just have something that people perceive of value, they're going to want to pay you more money for that product or service. So the trick for entrepreneurs and salespeople, regardless if you're selling someone else's product or you're creating your own product or service, you want to make the perceived value of whatever it is that you're selling much higher than the price at which other people are selling their product or service, because by increasing your perceived value, people are going to think your product or service is better, and then they're willing to pay you more money for that thing. And the last thing that you want to do is get into a price war and have your product or service be a commodity, because if you go into a price war, your margins will be really low and it becomes very risky for your business to become more profitable. However, if you find a unique thing that can make your product or service stand out and have that high perceived value, then you're going to be able to increase your prices. So now that you understand the concept of value pricing, let's go ahead and go over some simple pricing strategies that you can use for your product or service to determine what price you should be charging. So step one is you want to first identify exactly what your product or service is. Step number two is you want to do a little more research in what prices your competitors, alternatives, or complements charge, right? Competitors are people that compete directly against you. Alternatives are similar to competitors, but not directly competing against you. It's just another alternative someone can take to solve their problem. And a complement is essentially a product or service that doesn't compete with you, but goes along and supports whatever it is that you're selling. Understand the market. How much are people charging now? What's the current market prices? And step number three, what you want to do is you want to understand, again, what the customer's critical pain points are and how much money are they losing because of these pains. So essentially, if somebody has a pain, especially if it's a business problem, they're losing money from it. Or you can think of it from a perspective of how much money is someone willing to pay to make that pain go away, right? So this is when you really dive deep into the perceived value, because it's not enough just to look at what other people are charging. If you want to be different from your competition, you have to understand psychologically how much people are actually willing to pay to make their problems go away. Because if everyone's charging $100 for something and you find out that people are willing to pay $500 for a solution, and if you can create that value, that perceived value where someone will actually pay you that 500 versus 100, you can differentiate yourself and make yourself more higher end than everybody else. So that's just an example of understanding someone's pain and their critical problems and solving it and adding more perceived value so you can charge higher prices. And step number four, right, is how much do you believe your customers will pay to make that pain go away? Because it's not always about what the current market price is. You just really want to think towards that individual and understand how much money are they willing to pay. And step number 5 is, what do you need to do to increase your perceived value even more? So with these 5 steps, you have a product or service, you know what everyone else is charging, you understand your customer pain points, and you know how much money they are willing to pay you to make their pains go away. Then you can brainstorm some ideas, some more features to your product or service that will increase your perceived value to increase your price. So with this, essentially, it's a framework that you can use no matter what your product or service is to figure out what price you should be charging, and then how to increase your price if that's what you want to do to increase that perceived value. Now, from there, I have an exercise for you, and it's going to be a pricing worksheet. And in this worksheet, you're going to get down into solving these questions that we just covered here, but in a worksheet form. So in this worksheet, you're going to be able to fill it out as a PDF if you want to do it electronically, or if you want to just print it out and write with a pen or a pencil, then that's totally fine as well. So let's go ahead and dive into the PDF itself. Okay, guys, so this PDF is going to essentially be 2 pages. It's going to be the sales legacy pricing worksheet. So on the top here, the directions are, in this worksheet, you'll be strategizing what the best price point you should offer your product or service at. So like I covered earlier in this lesson, you have the cost, right? How much it costs for you to deliver on your product or service, and you have a price, essentially what's the price that everyone else is charging, and you just want to put it over here, and that's essentially the market price that you can sell your product or service for. From there, you want to figure out, what is your perceived value? How can you increase that price even further? And you want to put that number in here. So in the worksheet, right, to answer the questions that we talked about, what's your product or service? What price points do your competitors or alternative or complements charge? You can kind of put that right here if you want to. And then in page number 2, right, this is going to be a 2-page worksheet. And question number 3 is, what are your customers' critical pain points? How much money are they losing because of these pains, right? If it's a business problem, people are always losing money, or maybe through opportunity costs, or maybe they're just bleeding money somewhere. You want to put that here. And number 4, how much do you believe customers will pay to make that pain go away? And this is when you start to think about what is your perceived value. And number 5, what can you do to increase your perceived value even more? Maybe that's adding certain features, solving a problem faster, creating a better brand, whatever it is that is unique for your product or service. This is where you want to brainstorm your ideas here. Again, you could write directly on this PDF, or you can print it out and write with pen and paper. So once you answer these questions, you want to then go back over here. You already have your cost, you have the price that everyone else is charging, and then your perceived value, assuming you want to charge higher than other people, you want to put it over here. What's that perceived value that people have when it comes to your product or service, and you want to put it down here. And from once you finish this worksheet and you answer all of the questions, you should have a really good understanding of what your costs are, what the market price is for your product or service, and what you actually want to charge. And so once you have this price over here in perceived value, then you can go out and try to see if people are willing to pay you money for the price you believe that they should be paying. And if you're wrong and people actually want to pay more, that's great. You could change it up. Or if you're, a little off and people want to pay less, you could change it up. It's all an iterative process, but this worksheet is to give you the first steps, the first foundations to just get some kind of pricing down so you can go out and pitch it to customers. So with that said, go ahead and fill out this worksheet, figure out what your price strategy will be, and I'm going to see you guys in the next lesson.